US President Donald Trump's administration on Monday warned countries to cut their business ties with Iran or face secondary sanctions as part of economic D-Day. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has announced Operation Economic Outcast, an economic pressure campaign against Iran, vowing to target Tehran's financial interest across the world. Bessent said on Monday that the US would target all of Iran's sources of revenue, including oil, with the aim of preventing other countries and companies from doing business with Tehran. Well, Tuesday's action targeted other businesses in China, the UAE, Singapore and several other countries, including a cooking oil refinery in France. The Treasury Department announced new sanctions on 60 individuals, entities and vessels. That list did not include any of the Chinese financial institutions suspected of facilitating Iran's oil trade.
As I said, every country, every entity should know that they should be prepared to face U.S. sanctions. And no one is above this. We are going to hold everyone accountable, and this is economic asphyxiation of this regime. And Jennifer, as I said, no one should test our resolve. And I want to emphasize that we are spreading out across the world as we speak, that you will see a wave of sanctions when you leave this meeting today, and you should expect that cadence to continue. And I would expect that you will see a major announcement of a financial institution being sanctioned by the end of this week.
Well, meanwhile, Iran promised to retaliate against expanded U.S. economic sanctions, with Tehran expressing confidence that major trading partners would resist Washington's pressure campaign. Iran's economy chief Ali Madanzadeh on Monday dismissed new U.S. measures as another failure, saying Tehran had anticipated them and has a two-year plan in place. He said the government understands inflation, currency pressure and shortages, but vowed Iran would not only defend itself. He said, "We know how to play this game," adding the unipolar era is over and some major countries have rejected the plan. Well, the U.S. military said on Monday 2 people had been killed in a strike it launched on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific over the weekend. Now, the strike is the latest in a series of similar attacks that Washington says target narco-terrorists, but human rights groups say amount to extrajudicial killings. It brings the overall death toll to more than 200 people killed in 67 strikes during the nearly year-long U.S. campaign of bombing alleged drug boats off Latin America's Caribbean coast and in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And for more, we have Jessica Taneja joining us. Well, Jessica, how significant is the U.S. economic pressure campaign against Iran, and could Tehran's reliance on major trading partners such as China and other countries limit the effectiveness of Washington's secondary sanctions?
Well, the secondary sanctions in place and the possibility of implementing those on countries like China is certainly quite difficult. If you've seen in the recent past, the exclusion of Iran from the SWIFT payment system that has happened many, many years ago hasn't really been that effective in that sense, because China has been able to, trade with countries in local currency, especially with the Chinese in the yuan, and perhaps going ahead a little more with those options as well. But, with Iran's rial depreciating and with the currency not really picking up pace, as well as hyperinflation that still causes a major concern for the Iranian regime. But the times are such that the prioritization now goes towards military spending and away from public spending. So those are internal domestic pressures that the Iranian regime would deal with, but so far it has managed to survive, even when it comes to its oil trade, whether it be on teapots or as well as the dark fleet, the shadow fleet. All of that has been in continuation. It has been able to figure out different routes, but when it comes to secondary tariffs and the kind of retaliation that could await America, for instance, talk about China, The Chinese have shown resistance when it comes to such trade maneuvers in the recent past as well. You recall there was an export control on critical minerals where China was able to pressure the United States and bring back, the trade negotiations somewhat in its own favor, and also, figuring out alternative sources of American products that the Chinese were importing, say with Brazil. So there have been moments where the secondary sanctions haven't really worked very effectively, and evasion of those sanctions has been quite easy because in that sense, the Iranians have been able to figure out different methods of not just payment, but also different trade routes which would help it recover to an effect. But yes, these sanctions do cripple the Iranian economy, and they continue to, as they have been in the past few decades. So one will have to see as to how these secondary sanctions are implemented and what kind of retaliation awaits the United States and what kind of cautious approach it will take in the future.
All right, Jessica, thank you so much for giving that perspective to us.